Hello, everyone. Welcome back to What's Next with Lacey, the podcast where I interview young professionals about their career journey so far. I hope everyone's having a good week. I know that it is a pretty crazy world out there right now, and it's truly unbelievable to kind of see what's happening. But here we are. And so if you are listening around March 17th, 2025, then I hope you're okay. I hope this episode can provide a little bit of a distraction, a little bit of respite that I know we all need. So yeah, just sending all my well wishes. On that note, I this week want to introduce you to my wonderful friend, Seb. Seb is currently in grad school. He is at Columbia doing a joint degree at the School of International and Public Affairs, or SIPA, and Columbia Business School. Honestly, this was such a great convo, and I am very aware I say that every single week, but it really, really was, because I think that Seb gives us such a great insight into his decision-making and his thought process for every aspect and change of his career journey so far, which I think is just so useful to hear and understand, and maybe some people can get some great advice from him and from all he has to say. We talk about why he decided to go to grad school. We talk about why these programs specifically. We talked about how to best take advantage of your time there. We talked about different career paths that you can go onto, how school helps you with that, etc., etc. For an added bonus this week, at one point, he even turns the questioning to me, and you can get some of my insight in this episode too. That's honestly so scary. I will say, when he asked me a question, I fully blanked and forgot what the question was. But when I listened to it back, I actually am not that bad. My answer is not that bad. So anyway, that is not the highlight of the episode. Seb 100% is. I had so much fun talking to him, so I hope you enjoy my conversation with Seb. Seb, welcome to What's Next. How's it going?
Hey, Lacey. Happy to be here. It's going great. How's your day been?
My day has been busy. My day
Awesome.
has been, it's been busy, but we've been thriving. We've been surviving. How's your day going?
It's good. It's good. I had class this morning, then went over to the student gym and did some work and went to a speaker event on women in venture capital, female funders, it was called, which was a great time.
That's a great time. Gosh, the things you can do at grad school.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, should we dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So you have done so many incredible things in your career so far. You have taken so many different twists and turns, and all very exciting, all very different. But right now, as you just said, and as you just pointed out, you are in grad school. You are doing a joint degree with international affairs and international and public affairs, right? And then the business school, and then business school. So I guess my first question on that is why? Why did you make this decision? Grad school is a big decision. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. Why?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, it's a very long answer. So out of undergrad, I, of course, went into consulting. And at the time, I had some really interesting exposure to a certain brand of consulting that's been growing a lot, that we would label vaguely as geopolitical risk. So looking at different companies and saying, well, Coca-Cola has operations or part of its supply chain in Vietnam. What do they need to be aware of as a company? And what do they need to think about when organizing their supply chain, or building out operations, or entering a country and thinking about how they do business there? And what are sort of the risks from all that? And I really love that work. And I was interested in that, in this sort of geopolitical economic advisory work that was becoming a growing field. I was also interested in a lot of the more, I would say, emerging markets work that my consulting firm was doing at the time. Giant consulting firm, Accenture, they had a partnership program called the Accenture Development Program. Worked with a lot of startups and emerging markets. Loved that stuff. So from there, I had been at Accenture for a little bit over a year and got an opportunity to go to a boutique consulting firm that was scaling very aggressively. and would provide me a lot more responsibility, would provide me the opportunity to mentor younger people and sort of accelerate to a manager level very quickly. I had sort of known already that if I wanted to get into more of that geopolitical risk stuff or go into economic consulting or looking at emerging markets to any degree, I was probably going to need a master's degree or very, very nimble in terms of networking. And I began already talking to professors that I had from undergrad who advised me to look at programs in public affairs. So looking at Harvard Kennedy School, looking at Columbia SIPA, looking at Johns Hopkins SICE program, which is in Washington, D.C., as well as Georgetown School as well in D.C. And I took a look at those. I'd already known about MBAs from my time in undergrad after networking with a lot of them that had been on campus. And so long story short, I did 2 years at that boutique consultancy as it scaled rapidly and eventually got acquired. And begun in that time doing my graduate school applications. And that's sort of how I ended up getting to the application part.
Let's talk briefly about why you chose the program that you ultimately ended up choosing to do. You mentioned the 4 schools. Did you apply to all 4? What was that process like?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. So there's a contingent of public policy programs that are really, really strong, excellent programs that have pretty good placement. And there's just a ton overall besides that. Because this is a field that there aren't the most jobs for, I kind of wanted to over-index on 2 things: the network aspect of the school, as well as its sort of reputation among people in the field. And among those, they're all great programs. I applied to 3 out of the 4 I mentioned, got in, and strangely enough, it was a school famous for not giving a lot of scholarship that gave me the most aid, which really makes it much more doable.
Yeah.
And so it was a very easy choice to return to Columbia for grad school. Part of the reason why I chose SIPA as well is it's a much more economics heavy program. It's a much more quantitative program. It prides itself on putting or giving that option to take a more rigorous approach or take a more data analytics or quantitative analysis approach, which I really appreciated since I've been a history major in undergrad. And I sort of wanted to spread out a little bit more, not just having done that in economics in undergrad, but to get some more coding experience, data analysis experience, so on and so forth. Now, I had also chosen Columbia because, as you know, I love New York City. I love being here. And part of where you choose to go to grad school is very likely that you're going to end up there in that city. Thinking of it this way, if you go spend 2 years in DC, you're going to be networking a ton in DC. You're going to be going to events in DC that are exterior to your school. A lot of your network is probably going to fall in love with DC and want to stay there. So I really thought of it as well as this is me doubling down on New York City. I loved my undergrad here. I loved living here between grad school and undergrad. So it only made sense for me to stay as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's so interesting. I've spoken to lawyers as well, and they say the same thing about law school, that where you go to law school is most likely that's where you're going to end up. So that's interesting to know that it applies to grad school in general. Now, is there a specific track? Are you specializing at all at SIPA, or is it kind of a general program? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question because for all these public policy programs, they're very generic names, like a master's in public policy, master's in international affairs. And within them, they sort of silo off students really nicely into what is effectively their own degree programs. They don't want to get messy with the naming. So specifically, the one I went into was international finance and economic policy. And so that's sort of like your major course. And then there's a minor course that could be anything from international organizations, a regional specialization, data, I think it's data analytics and quantitative methods, or there's a number of them. I know I did the data one, but I think some of my friends did more regional studies. One of them did more energy policy stuff. And among the order major tracks, there's other stuff like security policy. So people that want to look at like basically warfare. How do we prevent warfare?
Yeah.
How do we work with diplomacy? People that are doing economic development, which is sort of distinct from economic policy in that it's much more focused on like looking at emerging markets, how do we provide them the resources they need effectively, both from like a financial standpoint to more of like an institutional standpoint, like how do we build up their institutions or how do we build up their political structures to actually be sustainable? And then finally, there's, of course, a larger energy systems and energy policy program. And that's something that Columbia has really leaned in on in the last few years. There's been a ton of jobs going there. And I'll see student after student who came to Columbia SEPA expecting to do finance, maybe go work at a hedge fund or go do banking or go work at like the United Nations or something. And they sort of got magnetically pulled in the direction of energy just because there's so many jobs in renewables and developers. That's a space I haven't fully explored, but I think it's super interesting. And it's just great to see these really smart public policy students find something new and get dragged towards something that's really growing and that actually provides some jobs.
Yeah. I was about to say for now until our administration shuts it all down. But yeah, that's true.
Having
Not
said
to get
that,
too dark.
To get a little dark, I mean, there were a ton of people that went to go work at USAID, and there's a ton of people who went to go work in other arms of the federal government that, unfortunately have seen some issues with the new administration already.
That is incredibly sad.
I think the school is going to adapt, and I think a lot of these programs are going to adapt to how does this new paradigm mean we need to quickly reorient our students who, even if they study public policy, how do they leverage that by going to a think tank or going to, let's say, Goldman Sachs Sovereign Advisory Group, or going to Fitch and going to do credit rating stuff. There's going to be a lot of different opportunities that arise from this and a lot more geopolitical awareness that's necessary for different companies. So I'm positive the school will bounce back and readjust, as well as any other public policy program. We'll be rethinking almost immediately, how do we get our students jobs in this new sort of system?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you're also doing a business school degree. How does that tie into the work that you are doing and are doing at SEPA?
Mm-hmm. So they actually complement each other quite nicely, I think. On paper, it may seem like there would be a ton of overlap from the economic policy perspective and the finance perspective with a traditional business school degree, but an MBA is its own beast. It is very, very, very focused on what the minds of executives are focused on. And how do you turn the students that come into this, maybe not necessarily through a ton of dense academic exercises, but through exposure, networking, and a lot of more qualitative and, of course, quantitative discussions of like the biggest topics you need to know to sort of run a business, work in industry, or sort of assist in any way within various aspects of the private sector, even if you go into the public sector. So it's kind of tough to articulate as well. The policy degree is it's a very specific kind of student goes to that, and a very specific kind of student goes to the business school. And when it sort of combines, there are a lot of synergies there.
Did you go into SEPA knowing that you wanted to add this business school degree, or was that something that you were like, you had started interning, you'd started knowing more about the field that you wanted to go in and felt like that was useful?
So I was pretty sure I was going to do the joint degree from the start. I had already talked with professors at Columbia about the business school, what they thought. And I had sort of received some pretty unique advice that I think is pretty helpful. A lot of the time with these dual degrees, you can apply within your first semester. And that sort of gives you the chance to feel it out and take advantage of doing the first year at the one degree to decide if you want to double down and do the extra spend of another year or another year and a half of schooling to get the other degree as well, it's a huge expense. But I think within the first year of SEPA, it sort of cemented the idea that I probably should do the business school degree. That being because, and this is sort of an unfortunate truth, just the way our society is sort of structured, it really cares a lot about MBAs and shows a lot of value to the MBA as a degree if it comes from what one would call the T15 or M7, which are like the top business schools, and employers in the private sector will care a lot more and give a lot more weight to having that MBA. Whether or not that's really the best thing or a bad thing, I can't really say. I definitely think MBAs are a lot of them are very smart, very committed to the private sector, committed to sort of the grind in a way that employers like to see. But at the end of the day, that's sort of how the system works. And it was pretty obvious that to give me sort of an edge in hiring and future career, the MBA would help a ton.
Yeah. What's been a moment while you are at grad school where you have been like, yeah, I made the right choice. Like, this is why I came back to grad school?
So I think a lot of people go into public policy programs, which are very academic, but are also, I would say, markedly pre-professional degrees, similar to law school or business school. You're going into that thinking, I'm jumping straight into a career. Very, very few people will go from that into academia or go get a PhD. I only know one or two people. So that degree is also kind of a networking degree. In part, you really get to know a lot of the policy community, a lot of the people that are going to be leaders in that, a lot of people that are going to be leaders as well on Wall Street, coming from SEPA or in the energy space. You have a broad network. Same for business school. I mean, that's kind of what it's famous for. For me, I kind of don't feel like I needed that. I feel like that's what a lot of people get out of it. I had a really great undergraduate experience with you. And I had a pretty broad network from that, I feel. And I felt like that was going to be more valuable as time went on. So I think what actually was really valuable was having that time to think and take a break and really examine various fields. So while I went in being really interested in geopolitical risk stuff, I had a lot of exposure to fields like impact investing and venture capital, which I had very limited experience with before. And that got me super interested in the space and led to me having various opportunities in private markets, unlike I had prior to business school. So really having that time to stop and think, I think, is immensely valuable as well. It's a great time. I had a good network, but I've made so many good friends and had such a good time. I would say there are tons of people that you'll meet that are like, oh, you really need to do a cost benefit analysis on whether or not you should go to business school, even if you have the resources, even if you have the scholarship. But at the end of the day, you're going to spend, 40 some years working, 2 more years outside of the workforce in your early 20s. Sure, that's valuable, but the amount of happiness, the amount of joy, the amount of just raw learning and raw information and exposure you can intake in those 2 years is so immensely valuable. I would almost always encourage people to look past the price tag. And that's sort of a big takeaway for me for what made me glad to be here.
Yeah, I love that. I love that answer because you're absolutely right. Everyone's just like, don't go into that debt, don't do it. But yeah, you are spending the rest of your life working. You can take this break and take this opportunity. What would you say you did specifically, if there's something specifically that you did that allowed you to explore these different areas that you didn't know much about? Did you make sure you go to a lot of events or something like that during grad school? How would you suggest people take advantage of the resources that are there to learn about these fields they don't know about?
I mean, when you're there, I think it becomes all encompassing. Even if you're more introverted or want to spend your time really studying, it's kind of hard to avoid all the events. Most of them are going to have free food. And next thing you know, you're sitting down in something. You have a bowl of, today was Chipotle, that you didn't pay for. And you're listening to a talk on, yesterday for me, it was battery storage technology and residential power, which I had not been exposed to, but was super interesting. And who knows, maybe someday in my career, I'm looking at a battery company and I can leverage this limited knowledge to go build on it, go do a refresher on my own time, and then come back to that more prepared, that sort of discussion. So yeah, I think they just sort of come at you. My first year, I went on an energy trek to San Francisco just to explore that area, knowing how big it was, and talk to some VCs that were in the space.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess the less obvious part of the advice is you got to sort of stomach the cost. Sometimes there will be a lot of extra opportunities that you might see and you might say like, I don't want to go on this trip, or I don't want to go to this trek. That's too much cash to just burn. But sometimes you got to burn it.
Yeah.
Just to sort of explore. Know when it's worthwhile and know when you could potentially get a lot out of that experience.
Yeah, I love that. You talked a little bit about your undergraduate experience, our undergraduate experience, both history majors at Columbia. What would you say was or is the biggest difference between undergrad and grad school?
So not so much because there aren't a ton of differences. It's just hard to pinpoint one. And a lot of this might be the fact that I'm at Columbia. It's much more dispersed. Everybody has their own lives now. So it's not just that like, you're an undergrad, we're all here, we're all going to see each other every day, and we're going to hang out all the time, nonstop. Like, yeah, there is a bit of that in grad school, but it's not entirely the same. You really can disconnect more when you want to, which is kind of nice. It lets you remain feeling adult. I think there's also an added agency you sort of have to be able to navigate your career more. You don't know anything when you're an undergrad. I didn't know anything, especially coming like from two immigrant parents. So going through undergrad, I learned a ton about career, about the world, but then you really only learn truly when you're out in the workforce and you spend a couple of years there and you have that perspective. Honestly, regardless of what you do. Like I'll talk to some people who put themselves down as like, oh, I was a screenwriter before this. I don't know anything about business. But in reality, just having worked at the bare minimum, doing a couple years and knowing what it's like to slog it out really enhances the experience and makes it entirely different. Being in the classroom and hearing from other people who, somebody the other day was in a course and brought up their time financing movies. It's like, wow, that's so interesting. I'd never thought about this before, and I'd never thought about it that way. So yeah, people really bring a lot of different perspectives in a way that you just don't get in undergrad.
Yeah. I have to ask, we've kind of briefly touched upon this, but there is this thought that business school is just, especially business school, is just 2 years of partying and networking. We've talked a little bit about the networking, but is it just 2 years of partying? Yeah.
So there are a lot of parties. There's a lot of socializing. There's a lot of fun stuff. There are a lot of trips you do. I know people who have been to like 10 to 15 countries in the last 2 years already. It's crazy. But I think it serves to be, it can be a denser, harder experience if you want it to be. So on the one hand, like at Columbia, at least, and a couple other schools, your grades don't matter. Like your grades don't go anywhere. They get recorded, you get grades, but they really don't mean anything. And they're like a unfriendly system. Like it's like out of 11, I think. Grades are, I don't even check mine, quite frankly. As long as like I'm passing and nobody's told me I did something wrong, I'm happy.
Yeah, fair enough.
But having said that, you can never really totally remove the pressure of having like an assignment that's due. And I find, especially when you lean in on the assignments, you know you're going to learn a lot. And when you realize, oh, hey, I'm paying for this, and you really focus in class, take notes, and go home, you can learn a lot. Sure, there are some people who don't really care and tune out, never go to class, whatever. But at the end of the day, I still find even those people spend a lot of time thinking about their career and do go to the things that are relevant to them and relevant to where they want to go. So yeah, I think it really depends on the person and depends on what they care about. For a certain subset of people, business school is also what I would describe as a second chance. So we went to Columbia for undergrad. We had a lot of opportunities for us that maybe we didn't know about, that people at other schools didn't know about and just didn't have the opportunity, like going into management consulting, going into investment banking, a lot of the time going into big tech, going to some prestige names. And they sort of now decide after a couple of years, like, I feel like I'm ambitious and I want to get up to these higher paying jobs and go work really hard and have these more prestige opportunities in finance. due to exposure in my career, or I just read about them online, or I learned about them from friends of friends. And really their best and sometimes only opportunity to get into those roles is to go to business school.
Yeah.
So there's some people who come to business school in their first year. They're absolutely committed to going to every single recruiting event for investment banking, or going to every single recruiting event for big tech and networking all the time. And because it's sort of their only chance for the most part, or their best chance. So those people, it's definitely not a vacation the first year. And then the second year, they take it easy and they know I'm going to be making some 300K when I get out of here. So I'm going to leverage my future income and enjoy myself now and then go grind when I'm out of here.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. There's so many different people who end up at business school. Everyone can't be taking a vacation for 2 years. You are almost done with your grad school experience. So what would you say has been the biggest challenge that you have faced in your grad school time?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's a little bit of maybe a more unique case. Some people come into graduate school with a very specific idea of where they want to be at by the end of it, and a very, very narrow idea. Like some people will go to SEPA and say, I want to go work at a macro hedge fund. And that's all they'll be doing. They'll just be focusing on that. They'll be networking in that space, taking coursework that's only relevant to that, maybe experimenting a little bit, but they'll go very sharply into that. When I sort of went into grad school, the things I was initially interested in, I did some networking, tried to apply, and I just sort of hit a wall of a lot of gatekeeping. Even though these weren't particularly like the most high paying jobs in the world that I was looking at. They were very niche and very like, we'll pick up people when we can. So even though I took coursework, it's maybe relevant, I sort of let my eyes and let my mind wander. And over a longer course of 3 years, it kind of becomes exhausting constantly thinking about your career and constantly thinking like, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go from here? And what specifically should I do and target? So there were times where briefly I was maybe targeting something or looking at something, really interested in something, and I didn't follow through as much as I should have because it's such a marathon. Doing 2 to 3 years, 3 years especially, you're constantly getting distracted or pulled into like, oh, you have a couple busy weeks, or there's this whole social thing going on. So yeah, doing the marathon approach and remaining focused on my goals has been more difficult than maybe it should be. But I don't think that's a problem for everybody.
No, you know what? I actually think that is, I like so relate to that. I think that is so real. And that's something that people don't really understand is that, yes, you should spend time looking at your, like taking stock of your career and looking at what you should be doing next. But it's also work. Like it is work to figure out what you want to do. It is work to find a job just as much as it is work to actually work. And so you're absolutely right. It is a marathon and not a sprint. And I feel like you should have grace. And that is such an interesting perspective and challenge to face in grad school when everyone does think, oh, this is just the time to party. This is time to learn more. Like, no, you are like constantly having, the clock swearing as well on this thing about what comes next.
Yeah, it's kind of stressful in the sense that like, there's something refreshing about being in work because you're just kind of there and your career, sure, you can plan ahead, but you're not thinking about it every day. So being in grad school, there's almost this exhaustion that people are always asking you, oh, what are you going to do next? Where do you want to be? What career do you want to do? What are you trying to pursue? And that sort of drains you when, quite frankly, you're like maybe 80% sure, 90% sure. And even let's say you're 60% sure and you want to go try something, that process is incredibly exhausting. If you want to get a job for the summer in venture capital, if you want to get a summer job in private equity, it's just easier said than done. It's an exhausting process. And it takes up so much of your time and mind space that then if you're like, didn't really work out for me, as some people I know who did banking and didn't like it, I don't know, I guess you're exhausted and you're burnt out a little bit. And there's no taking break from. I mean, you could take a break from grad school, but there's no like, I'm going to go into cruise control for a little bit, like some people do with work.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think about that even in terms of my own career. I have had such a struggle figuring out what I want to do. I've been laid off multiple times, constantly on the hunt to find jobs, and people have been like, go to grad school. And I'm like, great. But also then I'm still looking. And I think that you are so right. You hit the nail on your head. You can go into cruise control when you are working, and you can be like, yeah, I'll figure out that later. I am getting a paycheck right now, and whatever happens, happens. So I think that's such an important note and a perspective that I think people often forget.
Well, let me turn it around on you and ask you a question then.
Okay.
Do you ever worry that you just won't find something that's like the perfect job, or this is the perfect thing for me? And if so, how do you deal with that? Do you think we just need to sort of jump into something and try to maximize work-life balance, or maximize sort of a quadrant of ideas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that you shouldn't ever give up the hunt necessarily. If it's something that matters to you, if you are really concerned about, I want to be enjoying what I'm doing every single day, and that matters to me more than anything else, then never give up the hunt. But indeed, if you are like looking at your life and you're like, you know what, I don't mind if I am earning a little bit less, or I don't mind if I am only having these hours, or whatever it may be, then yes, you can just jump into something and you can be like, I tried to find what I wanted, but it didn't work out. And I actually appreciate XYZ more than that anyway. But I think for some people, and I think I might be one of those people, you won't be happy unless you're enjoying what you're doing every day. And I think that's why I put so much stock in putting in the work to figure out what you want to do. Because as we said earlier, you're doing this for 40 years. And I just know myself that like, I won't want to keep working. I won't enjoy myself for the next 40 years if I am not satisfied by the work that I'm doing on a daily basis. So
it's true. There's this idea, I think, of building a career in grad school as a stepping stone in that. Like grad school is sort of an accelerator in a way that you go do one thing and now you want to take things to the next level. Like you want to go you're a consultant already and you want to go be a partner at Bain & Company or BCG or McKinsey. And you do this as like, hey, this is part of my career. This is going to enhance it. Or you were sort of accounting and now you want to pivot to management consulting. And grad school is how you do that. And it's very linear. I just think it would be worth it with the length of our careers and the length of our lives now, that if we could find some way to reprogram our brains to thinking about it as like, this is a winding route. I'll go try this. Maybe I'll like this for a couple of years, and then maybe I'll switch and find what I can leverage from that experience into the next. It's just sort of hard to think like that when you're very focused on the idea of, I want to go work in venture capital and that's going to be the rest of my life, basically.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to think of the weaving of it all.
Well, also on that note, I think also, I don't know even what the category of like jobs, like the industry of working hasn't kind of caught up with that mindset either. And so I feel from, some experience, but I can't say I have a lot of experience, but I feel like so many workplaces don't necessarily value experience that you've gotten from a different job, a different industry. And they're like, I only want someone who has done this exact job, and that's how I am going to hire. And so, yes, I so agree that we should be winding. And I think that is the truth of the matter for how to be successful in your career. But more often than not, I'm discovering that workplaces are not in favor of that, or do not respect that, do not understand that. So it's amusing. It's a general ongoing thought and discussion I have, honestly, with everyone, but also with myself, about how to kind of navigate that. But it's
There's
interesting.
this terrible piece of advice that people always give let's say if you want to go work in venture capital, the prior example, or you want to go work in tech now and you want to pivot, be like a PM or something. And I hate this advice, but it's sort of emblematic of what the job hunt has turned into. It's like, start doing the job before you get the job.
Oh,
So
I know.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrible, but it is true. Like,
yeah,
at least
it is unfortunately true now.
It is unfortunately true. And I don't know whether that will change ever, but it does mean that, you know, if you can take on extra work on the side and get that experience that will help you to get that next job that you want, you should probably do it, because that will be more valuable to your next employer than the work you've been doing before. Yeah. At least now, and at least in my experience. So I could be wrong, and anyone can very much tell me I'm wrong, but that is what I have currently surmised about.
Frighteningly,
careers.
there are even now programs in China where you can pay to do an internship. There are a lot of paid internships where you pay and you fork over cash to go work for some company, get some prestigious name, and get some experience. There are a lot of startups in the US that are trying to make this a thing for PMs or software engineers due to this sort of crisis of too many people and too few jobs.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Speaking of that, though, and internships, you are at grad school have taken advantage of internships. So you've talked about how you've explored a lot of different things and you've kind of changed your idea of what you want to do. So why did you take the roles that you did, the internships that you did?
Yeah, so I'll do a brief overview and then I can sort of zoom back in on the first one. So first summer I had 3-year program, 2 summers. I worked for a startup, a Series A company called, or it just raised Series A, called 73 Strings, AI, FinTech, B2B SaaS. Whole lot of letters there.
I'm like, yes, I definitely know what that means.
Yeah. And then from there, I then did an opportunity through SEPA, sort of like a capstone. They have you do more of a sponsored internship program where you do a big project for whether it be Bank of America, McKinsey, the State Department, the government of Kazakhstan. It can be a lot of different stuff. I sort of remember how it worked, if I had to interview or the placement process. I know I had to do a long application, but I ended up working for the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund. And Nigeria is a beautiful country. I ended up going there for 2 weeks, go meet with them and go talk to stakeholders.
That's awesome.
As part of this project.
Yeah.
And then finally, I worked for a large venture capital fund, or a decently sized pre-seed and seed stage, so really early stage investors, venture capital fund in San Francisco, and spent my summer there, this most recent summer.
Were you still so set on this, you know, this like, what was it called? Government risk? Yeah. And that like kind of work? Were you taking this time to really explore something else? Like, what was your motivation to take each one of these? Were you like, I just want to explore this. I want to know more about this, or whatever it may have been.
So yeah, cautionary tale on the first one then. I had not gotten my ass into gear on getting an internship that first year. It sort of applied around. It was a tough market, and a lot of people I knew were getting traction, and it was very last minute. It felt like everybody I knew didn't have an internship. I had sort of kept in touch with a former client of mine who was the head of the Americas at this startup. And she was like, hey, we're just raising our Series A. We need an additional lift on sort of the executive team, doing sort of a jack of all trades role, like a chief of staff role, temporarily for the next couple months. Would you mind coming on? And it was kind of hard to say no to an opportunity that good. This was a pretty large startup already, and it had some really serious backers, as well as a lot of really top tier clients already. So it was like an opportunity. Like, this isn't what I initially thought I was going to do, but it's such a good opportunity. It's hard to say no. And the other stuff I was sort of looking at, like federal government stuff, would have taken me out of New York, and other things I'd looked at, just don't recall. They just weren't really panning out as nicely. And everybody was like, oh, maybe we'll know early summer whether or not we could actually take you on. And this was a sure thing that was going to pay me money.
Yeah.
And a lot of these stuff were trying not to pay and asking me to get sponsorship from the school. So that's sort of why I took that one. And it turned out amazing. A great time, really good experience. First time being sort of serving in an executive position, really being able to take my initiative within an organization, try things out, focus a lot on hiring. Like, how do we scale this organization? How do we do things now in terms of operations? How can we do things in the future that would be better? And then implement a lot of that stuff. I'd spend a ton of time in consulting, telling people what to do, or taking what my boss has told people to do and making it into very pretty PowerPoint slides or Excel models. So this was really a chance to like execute and operate, which was amazing. So I really liked that experience, and it got me more interested in the startup sector, and naturally sort of led to my internship in venture capital the next year. The opportunity with the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund is sort of a requirement at SIPA. You will have to do one of these projects. And I had chosen this one specifically because I wanted experience working in emerging markets and something that was hopefully private markets related, which Sovereign Wealth Fund is. And this one gave me exposure to so carbon credit investing. It's a lot to go into right now, but we were sort of looking at their fund work with investing in more renewable energy projects or things that tried to remove carbon from the environment. It was a new fund, and they also wanted to get into voluntary carbon markets and ITMOs. So like trading carbon credits. It's a whole thing, but they wanted us to look at some of their investments, look at their current pipeline, look at the network within the country, talk to a lot of different stakeholders, and in the end, build a legislative proposal for the government on how to incubate this office that would oversee all this work, as well as how they can better integrate nationally and internationally and regionally to source better investments and diligence investments faster. Really interesting stuff. That kind of led naturally into me going to go work at a VC then that summer, which is a hell of a process. You really have to grind to get those internships. I grinded a lot and ended up luckily at a really nice fund.
In what way? What ways did you have to grind to get these internships?
This one, I must have done like 50, 60 calls with VCs networking that semester.
Wow.
I was trying to do the job on my own a little bit, even though I hadn't done it, so I didn't really know how to do it. And I was applying to a ton of different jobs in what was pretty competitive time, and got shot down a lot, did a ton of interviews. And the thing that makes it even more exhausting is a lot of these companies will ask you to do some sort of even though you're only coming on for 10 weeks, some sort of a project where you'll probably spend 24 to 48 hours finding an investment opportunity for them, and then doing a long write-up on it. Sometimes that'll involve building a financial model. Really tiring stuff. I'm getting tired just talking about it.
I so understand. No, you're not at all. I'm thinking about how much I get frustrated when companies ask people to do that. When I was interviewing, and I was not interviewing for venture capital firms, but so many companies would ask me to do like various different tests and projects and things that I would spend, not 24 to 48 hours, but 10 to 12 hours on. And then you don't get the job. And I'm kind of wondering, I have this conspiracy theory that they do this to get a free idea. And they're like using you as their like researchers. And then they take your ideas and then they're like, nope, we're only going to go with this one person, but thank you so much for doing that. And I'm like, that seems mightily unfair.
Yeah, that definitely, I'm pretty sure it does happen. Thankfully, I've recently had interviews in these huge projects, stayed up all night, and I have friends that do it too, and then they don't even hear anything back sometimes.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the fund I work for, even if I hadn't, this was the last stage, even if I hadn't sort of passed that phase per se, I'm still pretty sure they would have communicated to me and provided me feedback, since that's just the people they are.
Yeah.
But there are definitely bad actors out there. Definitely happens with people that are looking at hedge funds. They're always doing projects. But what are you going to do? We have no leverage.
No, exactly. That's the way the world works. But yeah, that definitely does sound like a grind to get a job at a venture capital firm. I've got to ask you, how helpful was Columbia in your job search, both your internship search and post-grad search?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I'm glad you asked that. So there are very on-track recruiting processes for banking, consulting, tech, and people that are interested in like leadership development programs, which are sort of like rotational programs in big companies like L'Oreal or United Healthcare or the pharma one.
Pfizer?
Yeah, Pfizer. And those are really common programs, but they all have like a set track. So you show up in your first 2 weeks, at least this is what happens in the MBA. And the career services team takes you in, and they have like a second year student give you a talk and say, this is what you're going to have to know by October 1st. This is what you're going to have to know and how many people you should have talked to within each organization by November 1st. And then interviews will be over winter break. And the school will vouch for you and bring in these companies to make sure they come in and interview you and make sure there's some sort of decorum to it all. And manners are appropriate and nobody does anything wrong or, throughout that process. So the school really shepherds and takes care of those students. And in a way, there's an incentive for them. They know they're going to make money at the end and they'll have some thanks for that. But as well, for people that are doing something a little bit more unstructured, there are opportunities, but you have to go hunt that down. So if you want to go work like I mentioned yesterday, this battery tech company, the company came in because one student had worked for them over last summer. And I believe it was just, she was looking around and had reached out to this alumni and said, hey, I read about you guys. I'd love to chat. And they connected and just one thing led to the next. And I think the school even subsidized that internship. So if you're at big business schools like Columbia, like Harvard, like Wharton, like MIT, sometimes if you want to go do something weird, like working for a startup or even building your own startup, the school can financially support you. But the act of finding that role to begin with, the school generally isn't going to be that helpful. Like the network will be helpful. It'll be pretty helpful, I'd say. Maybe the job board will be mildly helpful, but at the end of the day, it's going to be you talking to other students that are going to point you in the right direction of something, or just reaching out and being entrepreneurial.
Is there something that you do to make sure that you are taking advantage of the internships that you have? Like, are you making sure that you are obviously doing a good job, but like connecting with people, that you are, like providing your best work product? Like, what are you doing to make sure you're taking advantage of the 10 weeks that you have?
Yeah. So the two major internships I did over the summer were with smaller teams. And the one I was sort of served as like a pseudo temporary exec in a way. So I got to know basically everybody pretty quickly because you're working with everybody, especially when you're helping hire people and bring people on. But if I was at a larger company, like if I was at BCG or if I was at Goldman Sachs, I think that's incredible advice. You should be talking to everybody you can, really making sure you have like a regimented connection schedule, whatever. You have some sort of tracker you keep on your computer of like, okay, I talked to this person, I need to talk to that person now. But for me to make sure I got the most out of it, I think it was just a lot of asking for feedback. Sometimes people don't really give any, but saying like, hey, how is this? Am I on track? What could I be doing better? And then being really, really annoying about asking for more work. This wasn't really that much of a problem for me, but I would always ask my boss, like, hey, is there anything else I can help you with? Hey, what can I take off your plate? Hey, like, do you want me to take a first pass at that for you? And then you can take a look at it and it'll just make your day a little bit easier. It's kind of common sense stuff, but it really helps to constantly remind yourself that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I let you go, I want to ask for like specific pieces of advice from you. What advice would you have to make sure that someone succeeds in grad school?
Yeah, pretty straightforward and simple. Just talk to as many people as you can. Always be friendly. Try to think of people, especially in business school, as not just friends, but even if they're not going to be a friend, as like a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're working with people on a project, make sure you put good work in, or at least say like, hey, I'm really busy right now. I can't work on this tonight. Would you mind taking some lead on this? And then I'll work on it more next time, as well as just exploring as many different things as you can. Even if it's not relevant to your career, like I took a class on economic espionage, being
That's
like state
awesome.
sponsoring individual actors to go in and like spy on big companies and then sort of use that information for like their own companies at home or state funded research. Most random
Wow.
thing. And it's sort of come up a couple times because it kind of gave me exposure to cybersecurity, physical security in a way that was more so than if I just like read a couple articles on the FT or on New York Times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, try some different things, experiment. I think some of the people that get the most out of it are people that know very much for sure what they want to do
Mm-hmm.
and can retain that and have consistency in that. Because that's obviously where I've struggled. But for other people, I guess just being able to explore and try to be okay with the fact that you are exploring.
Yeah. What advice would you have for applying to grad school and making sure that you are successful in that way?
Oh, yeah, pretty straightforward there. Just do your best you can on the tests. They say the tests are optional, but you should probably give them a shot and see how high you can go on them. It helps, especially with scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And then just having people tell you this, but it really is essential, having a very cohesive narrative for I did this before. I want to go to grad school in your program because you guys have this, or this, and I've talked to this person about it. And all that stuff is relevant to either what you were doing before or how what you're doing before, now you're going to transition to something new.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, talk about like, I want to engage with the community and be a big member, and you have this club or that. They don't just want to hear about like what you want to do in the future. They want to hear that and understand that regardless of if you're in a policy program, if you're at law school, if you're at business school, they want to hear that you are going to engage with the community and take, maybe even if not a leadership role, taking some sort of like initiative on helping out some like legal review or whatever. And then you'll sustain membership within that community throughout the rest of your life. Like, yeah, I'm going to go to SEPA and build this huge network, and I'm going to be friends with those people and be engaged with SEPA for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Just checking all those boxes for them.
Yeah. Kind of looking at your career as a whole, what would you say is the best career advice that you've ever been given?
You know, I generally shy away from that. I don't think there's just one thing. And I think it's very situational.
Yeah.
I would say something maybe I didn't think about, or I couldn't, having that consistency and diligence to always be reminding yourself that you're in a growth period when you're in your 20s, like you're now.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, I'm at this job, I want to learn. I don't care if I like screw up some stuff. Hell, it doesn't even matter if you get laid off. Like the fact that financial circumstances.
Yeah.
But being able to say like, I'm going to experiment, I'm going to push forward, I'm going to say yes to this within means and try something new or try something difficult, and just make sure that you communicate really, really well. I think in the age of AI, people may think that communication, being able to send a good email, whatever, is becoming commodified.
Mm-hmm.
But that only works when you have the initiative to begin with to use the AI. At the end of the day, you being able to know when to communicate and know what to communicate is important in the past, and then becoming even more important when more technical skills like being good at Excel or being good at PowerPoint or being a good coder is becoming more commodified. Right now, I could probably whip up an app in ChatGPT
Yeah.
in a little bit of time, or whip up a deck on one of these other AI services pretty easily. Just tinker with it. So when all of that becomes really easy to do, what's going to stand out is your ability to know when and how to communicate.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then I do have one final question for you.
Yeah.
And that is, for you, Seb, what's next?
Yeah, I'm going to finish grad school in May.
Yay, so
and
exciting.
there are going to be all these like fun little MBA, end of MBA trips. And then I am going to move to Malaysia. I'm going to open up a cocktail bar in Kuala Lumpur. We're going to serve tostones, Cuban plantains, Cuban flattened. And we're going to serve other little snacks. And we're going to have really excellent cocktails and sometimes jazz nights. And look, I know a Muslim country, you would think, why is there going to be a premier cocktail bar there? But there's got to be, somebody's got to start it. They've already got some great bars. And I'm going to write novels and poetry. But all kidding aside, I'm looking at startup space again, and sort of the Series A, Series B space, when these companies are looking at really like accelerating their scaling, either from the perspective of a operator or as an investor. So going back into the venture capital industry, there's some right now, if I was purely focused on just one, I might miss opportunities in the other. And this is very much one of those careers where it helps to wind around and try out being an operator at one point and being an investor at another. And they provide insights for both sides.
Yeah.
So, sort of where I'm looking.
Wow. I was really looking forward to that cocktail bar. I was about to jump on a plane, come visit you.
It's not too late. We could still do it.
Let's do it. I'm ready. Yeah. I will throw it all away for Mauritius. Wait, is that where you said we were going? Where are we going?
Kuala Lumpur.
Kuala Lumpur. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate it. This has been so interesting. And I feel like we learned a lot. I learned a lot. And I feel like all my listeners have probably learned a lot as well.
Well, we'll look forward to the next time we chat.
Well, exactly.
It's been great. Thank you so much. And next time I want to hear more of your insights. I want to hear more of your thoughts. Ask you questions.
Full of insights over here.